Welcome to the Tabletop Totality podcast. My name is Cody, and I'm joined here with my closest friend ever. Oh, no, wait, Sean's not here.
Steve's here, though, and feeling a little bit hurt.
Yeah, I mean, Neil's here, and it's about right.
And Frank doesn't care.
He does, though.
He cares more than me.
Anyway, so speaking of the death of friendships.
The death.
We wanted to talk today about death in Dungeons and Dragons, or really just in role playing in general. I can attest to I've had a lot of characters die. I've killed a lot of characters. Killed a lot of NPCs. My current homebrew is quite dangerous for the NPCs. They're not doing so hot.
Yeah, they die a lot.
So really what we're trying to look at death as the bigger picture here. In your role-playing games where it can really kind of be a sore subject. You can have people that can be very attached to their characters, that lose their characters tragically, or they made a mistake. Even mechanically, with the number aspect of the game, they didn't realize how an ability worked, or the dice simply just let them down and the character dies. And, I've been at a table where people have had bad feeling, hard feelings about those sort of things. Mm-hmm. So I've tried to develop a lot of different ways of going about it, where like death is a possibility in my world. It's an inevitability, actually. Resurrection, coming back to life, being brought back to life through some divine means, those are all possible in my world. They're not readily available. They're not a commonplace. You can't just go to any city and find any temple and any priest will just bring your friend back from the dead. That's not how it works in my world.
Yeah, I think that's a really good rule of thumb to usually go by, because if you get those points where it's really easy to bring people back, they just do reckless things. Like, the player doesn't have that in mind, right? A regular person who's running around trying to save the world isn't just going to willingly, throw their life away every single second. They're going to see it as too big of a deal. You know what I mean?
Isn't that's the meta of it too? We kind of were discussing this before, is that's the meta of the player saying, well, my actions don't so much matter with my character because I can get this character back in a day, 3 days, whatever, Yeah. Like, if my character goes in there swinging and dies, well, they'll just scoop him up and throw him in the cart and I'll be brought back, Yeah. And there won't be any problems. And that's the kind of gameplay I don't really want in my world. I think it's more genuine when, the player realizes, this is what has to happen, or this is it. This is the end game, and I need to make that call. I need to put on the Infinity Gauntlet, and I need to save the world.
Yeah.
Oy vey.
Who loves me 9,000? That's what I want to know.
It's 3,000.
Whatever.
Well, he wants it 9,000. Yeah.
9,000 is 3,000 times 3. So,
yeah.
What's up? Fast maths.
Fast maths. Well, I think we should talk about all the deaths in general, not just PC, but NPC. And then something that I feel gets overshadowed all the time when it comes to death is your characters, like your players and your characters, are actually dishing it out quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel that playing on the one side of the table, they don't actually see it that much. Like, it's happening, but they don't take it in the same way that they would, like, say, we're real. Obviously, it's not a role-playing game. But I feel like that is something that very much just gets passed over, and it's actually happening. Your characters are going in there, they're fighting these things, they're taking these things out, they're killing NPCs, and even though they're not directly linked to the party, there should also be consequences there. That should piss somebody off. First of all, if NPCs aren't trying to escape, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
There should always be NPCs trying to escape in a group battle, trying to get help, trying to warn other people. That's going to help build some of that momentum, and it's going to actually put some heat on the players to be like, we need to keep moving, we need to go now, or we need to flee, we need to get back up, we need to come back and deal with this, some other way. So that's my take on the first part of it. And then obviously we have, friendly NPCs that can die, and that's its own basket that you need to really deal with in a very specific way, and it really depends on your players, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you bring up a really cool point there, Frank, on the aspect of players are just constantly dishing out death. Like, they don't think anything about the bandit they just killed. And once, like, that's why it's cool to add in those friendly NPCs, because as the GM or the DM, you know what I mean, you don't want to dish out death on the same scale. But that's like the cool thing you can do when your characters start forming bonds with these NPCs is have one of them die, and then they'll kind of realize, oh snap, like, it can happen to us. You know what I mean? It paints that picture a lot easier.
Yeah, and at the same time, you could have players who are playing characters that aren't dishing out death a whole lot. In one of the characters that I played pretty recently, his whole deal was that he was a diplomat, and he wasn't a combatant. He was a guy that went and talked things out. And I was playing alongside a barbarian, and we were in a cave with a bunch of monsters, and the barbarian was just like, well, guess I'm just gonna start slicing and dicing and just start murdering all these monsters. And my character used persuasion and diplomacy in order to end that conflict without any of the enemy monsters getting killed at all. I think one of them might have died, but it was like, if my character hadn't intervened, both of them probably would have died. So I mean, you could play it that way too, where it's like, you're not always dishing out murder. You could find other ways to resolve conflicts that just don't end in you killing a bunch of stuff. That character did come back later and helped kill a dragon, but sometimes sometimes you can't make that choice. Sometimes you're dealing with creatures with some intelligence that are willing to listen to what you have to say and talk it out and say, all right, I guess we won't kill you, but you're gonna have to do other stuff for us instead. And then there's other times where you encounter a creature that's like, no, I'm going to murder you. Okay, well, I guess I have to fight for my life then.
Well, and that's just like, I feel like, we kind of brought up this point before when we were just kind of fooling around before we started recording, and we were saying that, if it was so easy for everybody to go and fight the dragon or kill the mind flayer or whatever, everybody would be doing it. Like, there is a real risk involved with your characters being in this world and being in the adventuring life, if that's what they're going to do. Steven, as you said with your character with Marek, you were not a combatant. You were a diplomat. You played a diplomat, and that's great, because you were able to, as an experienced role player, say, that's not my role. That's not my job. Like, that's not the character, And when you were involved in those situations, you did things to protect yourself, but also to try to de-escalate. And I remember that you tried to appeal to the dragon, and the dragon was like, no, I want all of you dead. We had a similar situation with a mind flayer where the party was like, hey, you're going to tell us what all this stuff is. And he was like, disintegrate, because he wasn't in for negotiation, like, you're in his lair and he's got the upper hand. But really, I think that's a different subject in itself. I'm talking more or less about what happens when the beloved NPC, the favorite character, the animal companion, whatever, dies, and you as a dungeon master are stuck with that new reality. And you're gonna have people that are, some people are not gonna take it as well as other people.
No.
I've seen people get emotional about stuff, and it's understandable, because if you devote a lot of time an effort into something, to see it kind of taken away from you, it can be upsetting. Certainly there's times when people, they made their own mistakes. Like, what was the famous one with like Keyleth, where she like turned into a fish and then like fell like 3,000 feet or something.
She jumped off a cliff, jumped 400 feet off a cliff, and then died.
What are you talking about?
In Critical Role.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't watch
idea.
that either.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Half of our group does, half of our group doesn't.
Yeah. 'Cause we diversified.
No offense to the show, I just never took the time.
I'd rather be playing it than.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying, but like that character had a lot of power. Was a powerful druid and made a bad decision that led to the character's death.
Yeah.
Dumbest decision.
Now they were able to resurrect that character, and Steven and I, we had talked about how Matt Mercer had kind of done his resurrection system, and I had kind of done a similar situation in my homebrew.
It sounded very similar, considering that you've never listened to season 1 of Critical Role, and it's like the fact that your resurrection and his are so similar. It's very interesting, and I think that it's better. I like those two versions better than what the book. Like the book has like, oh, you just use a diamond or whatever, and then the person is resurrected. And with both you and him, it sounds like there has to be more to it with the characters. Like the characters actually have to make a plea and bargain with the person who died to bring them back, and also offer some sort of object that means something that relates to their relationship. I feel like that's like a way more meaningful and better way of resurrecting somebody than just saying, oh, I just cast a spell and this diamond that costs 500 gold is gone now and this person's back to life.
Well, I'd like to add on that is one thing that a lot of people don't take into consideration with a resurrection is, first of all, it has to come down to the other person that you're resurrecting to confirm whether or not they're coming back. They can just say no,
Right.
And I've actually played a character who declined resurrection. Everybody was like, they started turning on the people that my character helped defend. People pulling out their weapons, saying, you need to resurrect him right now. And the head cleric, the head druid was like, he doesn't want to come back.
Yeah.
He made a sacrifice and he lost. Literally, my character had a Rick Grimes moment. Like, lost his whole family. Like, he was burying his people from this giant battle that had happened, and then these creatures came to attack and sacrificed himself with the big bad. Lost his life. So did the big bad, luckily. But when they tried to resurrect him, it just didn't happen. He just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that that comes down to that comes down to obviously the wants of not just the player but the character, and you did a good job of being in that character's mindset of saying, hey, that's not at all what this person was about. Like, you bringing this person back is an offense to how they lived.
Yeah, how they lived and how they died. Like,
yeah, they sacrificed themselves to save these people. Like, their death meant something. It's time to move on. Whereas, in my setting, we had an NPC who was a younger NPC. He was a tiefling. His name is Hubris. Kind of talks like Dave Mustaine.
It's weirdest thing.
Yeah, and hello, me.
Yep, that's it.
And he, he joined up with the party. He was a bard. He's one of our homebrew bard class creations, and we wanted to test him out in the world. He became a part of the group. He was like their little buddy. He ended up getting into a confrontation with some pretty bad evil guys, and he ended up losing his life. And the party was very upset about him dying, and they threw him into a bag of holding. And
Gentle reposed him.
Yeah, preserved him as well as they could, and they carried him around the continent for like a month after that. And the question was always there about, what do we do with Hubris? What do we do with him? What does he want? And it was a cool role playing thing because the characters as well as the players were divided on it. And so as much as like some of the players might have said like, hey, hey, he's useful, he's a bard or whatever, that's meta in my book, like you got to be thinking about it in terms of, hey, this guy was only 16 years old and he lost his life trying to help us. Maybe we should bring him back, give him a chance at life. Maybe we should do this, do that. Well, it really divided the table because people were like, hey, that's unnatural, like he died fighting a death cult, of necromancy.
Yeah.
And now you're going to turn around, you're going to bring him back, like
that's a little weird, a little sketch.
Yeah. And
a little bit.
Depending on the different characters' religious views or even just where they were from on the continent, they had different, in my setting, the North is much more traditional, whereas the South is a little bit more industrial, a little bit more of a metropolitan type situation.
Yeah. You're more urban.
Yeah. And, so I just think it's important to, especially as a DM, if you're listening to this to get tips as a dungeon master and maybe you just recently had a player character die at your table or an NPC die and you're not sure how to deal with it. It's kind of hard to navigate it from this point. The best advice I could give you is to, before session 0, be like, these are the laws of my world. This is the setting that I've created. This is what's possible. I feel like you need to explain to your players like, hey, if your character dies, yeah, there are options for them to come back. The book, the player's handbook, there's spells out there that can do it. If you don't have those particular type characters in your party, a cleric or a druid or wizard, even a bard cast wish, your options become slimmer.
Well, especially in those, sorry for cutting you off, but especially in those early levels, because when I'm a player in Cody's homebrew and I'm a paladin, and not until now, which was practically months ago when this NPC died, and now when we're playing, does my paladin have the ability to even cast Revivify? You know what I mean? So we were at such a lower level and we were in the middle of nowhere that's why we did have to travel with this corpse in a bag of holding for a month in game.
Yeah.
Because of those such things. So I think that's also a factor to look at as a DM, right? Hey, is this an early player death or NPC death? And now they're in the middle of nowhere. There's no way that they can even bring them back, according to the rules. But do I want to allow something else to happen?
Yeah, and like it was cool too because we had a player in the group that wanted to try to speak with dead, and the rules for speak with dead are very, very specific. And basically what this character wanted to do was ask Hubris, hey, do you want us to bring you back? You want us to bring you back because we will. Yep. And that's not possible with Speak with Dead because you're talking to their memory.
Yeah.
You're talking to whatever spark is left in the shell of their body. It's not their present thought. It's not their present mindset. It's them from the past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can only tell you things that they can remember. And on top of that, they could choose not to tell you anything.
Yeah.
They can choose to lie.
Yeah.
And that's why, Steve and I were kind of touching on the whole Matt Mercer resurrection thing. I've watched a little bit of Critical Role on the first season, much more on the second season. I enjoy the show. I like the way Matt does stuff. His resurrection definitely, and mine, very similar, where I basically came up with you have the person who is dead, you have the person that can bring them back, they have the spell and all the components, they're able to do it. Now you as players need to address this person's spirit in some sort of way. And so I came up with, I thought about Hubris and I thought about what are the possibility that he wants to come back. He had lost his family, he had died young, but he had kind of gained a new family with the party. So I'd said, well, maybe he's about 50-50, you know? So I had that in mind, that there was like a 50-50. So then as everybody came forward and they did something, or they said something about hubris, or they pleaded to him, or they brought him something, and it was really cool. Is I was using my other NPC's Forge domain cleric, and he was basically like making like a burning heart, like a molten metal heart, and he was like combining all of these objects and things that people were bringing for hubris into this heart, and then he had put the heart like magically into Hubris's corpse, and then that was how he was casting the spell. And that's just my own details on it, just to fit the story of the characters. But yeah, every time somebody did something that I felt was significant, I docked a percentage, a certain percentage off of what they needed to succeed, because I felt that every time somebody brought up something that was heartfelt or important, that would be a further reason for this character to come back. And I feel like that gives it a little bit more like reverence for what's going on. And I also think it allows it keeps it in mind that it's not a guaranteed thing.
Yeah.
It's not a guaranteed thing, but then it also, I think most importantly, I think it kind of overlooks the fact that maybe as a player, maybe you're saying, hey, I'm done with Roomrick. I want to go play, Sporks Mackenzie, who's my dual wielding goblin samurai chef.
That sounds like an amazing character.
Is this an actual character?
I know.
No, I don't think so. It is now. It is now. Sporks Mackenzie, the samurai goblin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody write that down.
Yeah, write that down.
It is being recorded.
No, that doesn't matter.
Yeah. But so that's not my point. Is I just think that I feel like if you just are constantly just reviving people and there's no consequences for anybody's actions, it kind of takes away the whole point of the story, because there's explicit inherent risk about going to kill a dragon to get its hoard or do something like that. Like, if it was easy, if it wasn't dangerous, anybody would have done it.
Yeah.
If there's no consequences for these things, then what's the point, sometimes people think I could be a little heavy-handed with fucking with killing players and all that, but
well, to counter that thing, if you're playing a small campaign, couple nights, or even just a couple of weeks, it's not a big deal if you can do that, especially if that's the style you want to do it. But for very long-term campaigns that you want to have a lot of gravity in there, absolutely you should go with a system where it is not easy, it is not simple, it is not just boom, I am back, here we go, let's rock and roll. It really depends on the style of play you're doing, the kind of group you have, and how much gravity you want to bring into it. One of the big things in writing that they say is, when a character dies, their story ends.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to have them written out to like, oh, I closed up all their things. You're writing a novel. Sometimes you have to leave open storylines when they die. Like, you just can't help it.
Yeah.
It just, that's how it sometimes goes.
But that's how the story ends. It might not have been the way you wanted it, but that's the way it went, and sometimes that makes for a better story, like a story, what I mean? Yeah. If everything's not planned out and you kind of roll with that surf for a little while, it can make a really fulfilling character on an RP sense.
Yeah. And then to go off of that, like, there's a lot of ways to deal with NPC death. When it comes to player death, I don't know if you guys want to jump into that right now, because there's a lot of things that you got to make sure you cover before you start taking out PCs,
Yeah, PCs is definitely more difficult compared to NPCs, just because, like, you could always it's easy to bring an NPC up to that level that it was at when it died, but like a player character is a completely different deal.
Yeah.
And just the simple fact of, like, if you're a person who's trying not to metagame, or you have somebody who like subconsciously, accidentally, whatever it is, metagames a lot. If their player dies and they bring in that new player, it becomes that much harder to keep that all sealed in, and that's not even dealing with if there is resurrection or not in your campaign. That's just the natural thing you're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah, the big thing that it comes down to is talking about it before you really start playing in your session 0, if that's how you operate, and also communicating with the players in general. If it's like, hey, this is a reality, like I'm not gonna intentionally go out and try and kill you, but if it happens, it happens. And also some DMs have a very specific way of doing things, like, or just game masters in general. Like, I am totally in agreement with, if you're fighting a savage beast, even though it just dropped you, it should still probably hit you again.
Yeah.
It should probably try and make sure you're dead, especially if it's a smart one.
Yeah, and that gets into, there's a website that I have frequented before. The Monster Knows What They're Doing is the title of the website. The people over there, they do a great job of looking at monsters and trying to give a breakdown. Like, hey, this monster has an intelligence of a 14, it's gonna recognize what a threat is, or it's gonna recognize what the weakest link is in your defense, and I think that that's something that needs to be brought into effect. And a lot of the times that people have died recently in my games, it's been because of there was some effect that was continuing to happen in the area that hit them while they were incapacitated, like a poison gas or something like that, or a cloud kill, or
those get you.
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's just certain times where like they say this, they say like, oh, did DMs ever hold their, did they ever pull their punches?
Oh, all the time.
Do you ever fudge something because it's gonna break the game? Are you gonna TPK your whole party because you mismanaged your monster, or are you gonna, Yeah. So, I mean, I try not to be that way. But there's been situations where I'm trying to think 5 steps ahead, and I'm like, this is just gonna get bad, like,
and it has gotten bad.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah. And
sometimes you gotta just let your, like, it's one of those things, you gotta let your party figure it out. Like, how much do you pull your punch before you're just spelling it out, run away?
Yeah. Well, I'm very much on the opposite notion of where Cody is. Like, I don't pull them very much. I sometimes, like, if you start pulling that punch back, I'm gonna just let it release and let it hit somebody real hard, because sometimes it's the only way. I've had I mean, when we first started playing, we started playing in my living room at, I think it was 13, and I was the dungeon master for a very long time in our teenage years, not only with this group but with others. And fortunately and unfortunately, I have taken out quite a few PCs. I've seen all the sides of what can happen when you take out a player character. I've also had my characters taken out. Yeah, there's a lot that can happen.
Yeah.
And you really gotta, if you just take out a player for no reason, like you're just targeting them, that's bad management. That's not good.
Yes.
It's not good
and
at
if
all.
And even if you're targeting a whole party, that's bad management. I mean, I remember us.
Oh, how are you supposed to play the game then if you're not attacking the party?
It's DM versus party, man. Come on.
Well,
Everybody knows that.
But I'm just saying, in those older times, I remember certain times when we were playing 3.5. Oh, you're all level 2. Go fight this dragon. And it's like
that was the second or third time we ever played. So nice way to turn that one.
Yeah, but you learned, Frank.
No, I didn't.
Steve never
didn't.
Steve did not.
I've killed Steve the most out of every player.
I died more than anybody.
I'm pretty sure I've killed Steve the most amount of times too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that's also because I didn't know what I was doing, but at the same time, as a tip for dungeon masters, if you have somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, maybe don't put them into a situation where they're going to get murdered instantly.
And to counter that point, if you're that person, don't put yourself in that situation. if you can help it. So
well, if you
Double-edged
can't help it,
Yeah, that's the whole. That's you could give and take on that all day because you know the dungeon master has a responsibility to know the rules. The player should know what's on their sheet. They should know what they're capable of doing.
and the
you
player
know,
should
like-
do everything they can not to put themselves in front of the dragon right before it shoots out that blast, especially if that player has has got that dragon's full attention.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there, but you know,
I think you should have jumped in its mouth, Steve.
I mean, I'm pretty sure
He
that
did
I was like
when it ate
snuck.
him.
I'm pretty sure that I was like snuck around and everything, and I maybe failed a roll.
well,
or
that was
something.
this is over a decade ago, so there's
this
no
is
way of
forever ago.
remembering how that happened. Let's get back to the topic. We're getting
But
old
one of
wounds
my
we're opening.
one of my points that you're kind of both of you have mentioned on, and it's that, do I pull the punch or do I not? And sometimes personally I find myself in those first few levels, it's so easy to kill a player character that's when I'll pull my punches, right? I'll let them. This is almost going to sound a little bit messed up, but I let them get attached to their characters.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
so they don't make those bad decisions.
So it hurts more.
Yeah. So I just cut them.
Well, remember what I said earlier. You know, once the character dies, the story's over. So what you're saying, Neil, is 100% on point. Like,
Yeah,
you want them
like-
to get attached. You want them to be invested.
Exactly, because if they're playing characters that they're constantly, if there's constant player death, and they're just, it's again, they're gonna think, oh, my character's gonna die. Doesn't matter. I got this cool idea. I want to run anyway.
Yeah,
Instead of
or even worse, oh, I'm gonna die. I'm done playing this game. It's not fun anymore because I keep dying. I'm just not gonna play anymore.
Yeah, and I've introduced a lot of people into D&D, and that was always a good way to keep them invested, at least for those first 5 levels, right? I always think your first 5 levels are your most dangerous killing level. Like that's the time you can die so simply, because you can throw a monster out there, and according to the book, its challenge rating's all right. It shouldn't be that difficult of an encounter, and it has one feature that is the trump card against your whole party.
Troglodytes, 3 attacks.
Exactly.
Yeah, Troglodytes only have a challenge rating of 1. You should be able to beat them.
Yeah.
Oh, they can attack 3 times in one turn. Oh,
Yeah.
whoop, I didn't realize. Well, you're all dead.
Yeah, so I mean, and even doing that, like, you can do it where there's still a consequence against that death, right? So even though those characters might have died, maybe they all went unconscious and now they're captured. Now they're fighting at least against like something of an intelligence level of like a goblin, right? Where it might capture who it killed to terrorize them more, just because it can. You know what I mean? Or they want to bring it back and make them slaves. And it'll open up a new play style or a new pathway for the story, but it's not just an overall, hey, your player character's dead, now we have to start from square one again.
Yeah, and actually to add on to what you said, Neil, just because a creature does enough damage to bring you to 0 doesn't mean that you're knocked out and you're going to die. Like in the rules, it very specifically states, like, you don't have to deal a killing blow. You could just completely incapacitate them. And then you don't have to worry about it. I've done that as a player all the time. Like, I don't always kill the enemy in front of me. I always want to make sure that, hey, if I can get some leverage here, I get it. So I make sure to, when it comes down to it, I'm like, all right, if I do accidentally kill this creature, I want it to knock it out instead.
Well, that's also been a point of contest in my campaign, is where, player characters have killed NPCs or killed enemies and done so prematurely.
Yeah.
And now there was consequences to that. You didn't find out information that you needed to know. You didn't get the whole picture. And so that was a way of putting meaning in that character's existence to me, and that NPC's existence to me, that they had a point, they had a role to fill. And when they got terminated, when they got cut short, then that stuff just doesn't. Your players don't just learn this information from killing them.
Yeah.
Like,
and And you also like, you guys kind of touched on a cool point that I always like also for like NPCs or even enemies, right? Is have them do saving throws for, like the book says you can just have them die, or they could go into saving throws. So maybe you killed them and they're on the ground and you think, oh, they're dead. You're not checking them. And now you go off. This is an easy way to bring that NPC back. You know what I mean? Oh, they stabilized themselves and you left them for dead, and now there's a vendetta against your whole party.
Yep, they know what everybody looks like.
Yeah.
They put a bounty out. That's
So,
a really good idea, Neil.
That's another cool way that I've handled some of my other aspects, and then it always makes the party, like, for that short amount of time, like, you can't do it again right after that, because then the party's just going around after they kill everything and they're just stabbing everything on the field. Their guard gets up after that point, but it's a way. Maybe something's going south in the plan you had. Maybe your guy, your big bad evil dude got captured by the party unknowingly, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna kill him, and so he fights back, they all fight, they see him drop, nobody thinks anything of it, we're like, yeah, we did it, and you leave.
Take his stuff, let's go.
Yeah, and somehow he's stabilized, and now he's back with even more anger in his heart.
Yeah.
So that's a cool way to handle like the NPC side of death sometimes.
I really like that.
Yeah, I try and make it so, like, especially with my campaigns that I run, I make it, especially with NPCs, I try and make it as close to a player character would be with chances, right? So of course they're gonna have the overall spotlight and everything like that, and they're gonna seen as something else, but if something gets smacked and there's no finishing blow, I'll roll off screen. You know what I mean? I'll roll to see what happens to that creature sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it a lot more interesting, because now your players have to think about it more. Like, it's one thing if they're shooting it with a bow and they hit it, they're going to be like, all right, whatever. I'm not going to, I'm never going to go back over there to see if that person now stabilized while you went into melee combat and ran and got help. But it also, I have that aspect, like we were talking about with creatures, dealing that final blow. If they have enough intelligence, they might know, oh, this thing is just unconscious, but it's still alive. So now I'm going to kill it and make sure it can't get back up, because it sliced me pretty hard that one time.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up an interesting thing with something that we tend to do once in a while is when we're playing a game, you kill like an enemy NPC, and then it's like, all right, well, how'd it happen? Once they deal enough damage. And sometimes, like, people do leave the opportunity for you to just be like, well, you did cut his arm off, yes, but you didn't actually say you killed him, and I did the rolls, and he's still alive.
Yeah, he's
and
stable.
He did come back for you,
Yeah.
So many awesome things that are now coming into my head. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, no problem. I'm always here to help.
See, even we learn stuff on this podcast.
Oh yeah, I mean, you talk to anybody about how they want to do it. Like, you get a huge think tank in there. That's when you're gonna get your ideas. Right. But it's one of those things you really gotta. All right, do I want you're running a campaign, you decide to run it. First question: do I want players to be able to come back to life or not? If that's a yes, how do I want to do it? And you tackle that question. And then you go, all right, and you present it to your party, game zero, or even before it, when you guys are discussing what the setting's gonna kind of be like. And I think that's really the best way. I think we can all be in agreement with that. At least, maybe not on the pull your punches, let it rip type of style, but at least tell your party what type of game you want to play.
And they may.
I think the big thing is that you are collectively trying to make a story together.
Yeah.
And you have to, as a dungeon master, value what your player characters are bringing to that story, what they're bringing to that world. Mm-hmm. And I always try to intertwine my player characters, into the stories that I'm developing. I'm trying to make it so that they have a reason to risk their lives or they have a reason to care about something. So when you get to a situation where that character might die or has died, that can be pretty hard. And I just think that the best way to be collaborative and to really just get the best out of it is to just sit down, like you're saying, before you play and say, this is the way that the world that I've created works.
Yep.
And I don't think that that's unfair to do. And you might not get everybody might not be into the same style of role play,
Yeah.
You have people that they are just there for combat, or they are just there for the intrigue or the lore.
Yeah.
You want to sit down with these people, get some pizza or whatever, and just say, hey, this is the concept I have for kind of what's going on, and this is where, this is my world. Here's the map. Here's this. But you need to figure out those things, and I think that when I was younger, I don't think that I paid so much attention to all the little details, and now older, wiser, more handsome, I definitely I definitely put a lot more effort into, okay, like, what celestial bodies are there in this world? What holidays are there?
Yeah.
How many days of the week are there? What's the, why is this stone used for all these buildings? Or what is this? But you continue to build off of all those little things. And when you give effort to those little things, those little details, you make it so much more of a real thing. And I feel that, like, when it comes to, like, the finality of a character, like the death of a character, like, you want it to have been worth it. And I think that if you have the right people at your table, when the time is right or something happens, you're going to have that character that's going to say, or that player that's going to say, I'm going to do it, or you guys run and I'll stay,
I think no matter what campaign setting you do, you always get to a point where something like that happens. I always feel like it,
Yeah, I've been guilty of being the player to, as everybody runs through the door, he shuts it behind everybody and locks it and stands there, deals with the issue. And a lot of the times that actually, it's very interesting, and sometimes that character does still make it out. It's a little awkward when you end up killing the threat that was chasing you, and you're like, all right.
I don't know how I did this.
Yeah. Oh, I got really, really lucky. Awesome. And then there's other times where, you as a player, you go to do something really cool. Like, you do this combat roll behind an enemy, you pull out your dagger, you're going to go stab him in the back with your sneak attacks, and you do all these things, but you keep rolling a 1, and then, your DM decides that you did the roll too well, and you smashed out the window, and you fall 80 feet to your death, and then the player right next to you throws their battle axe, rolls a natural 20, and kills the guy that you were going to do all this cool, fancy stuff with.
Yeah, that happened, and that axe was mine.
Yeah, and I was the guy who fell out the window to my death.
Yeah.
That was a
famous last words. No, Cody, I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One still stings to this day.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the dice gods say, hey, you got to fall out a window.
Yeah. Now, I know that brings up another thing about skill checks and the ones. We'll talk about that at a different time.
We'll
a fail is a fail
conversation
in my
on
world,
that.
Yeah. But
we won't
anyway,
even get into that.
Yeah, and I guess, like, that's kind of like pulling the punch too. Is that I've seen players that just like they'll just roll like 10 nat ones in a row, and I just have to say, like, it's not their fault. I don't want to kill their characters.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks that happened to you, but. And I can see that would be like, because I feel like fun is the biggest thing, right? If you're not having fun, why are you there?
Yep.
If you're not having fun, if it's not interesting to you, you don't enjoy it, don't put yourself through it. But that I think if I was going to try to bring somebody into this game and they just rolled like crap and then their character died, I would imagine that person would not want to play again.
Yeah.
Dude, I've had
You
people
know?
exactly in that standpoint. Like they're just rolling terrible, and we all have this one of the house rules. You know, you get one reroll throughout the night. You get one reroll, and you get to use it. And I've had points where I always give that, and like if they're having bad times, I'll remind them about it. And then if they use it and they still have bad luck, I'll be like, hey, you know what? Let's just reroll that one. You know what I mean? Like, it's if the probability is going in a direction that is very unheard of for a long time, is that given leeway or is that just evening the scale? You know what I mean? It's one of those fine lines.
With a very seasoned player, you know, if they roll a 1, they do use their reroll, and then they roll a 1 again. That's fate, baby. Like game over.
Yeah,
if you're brand new, yeah, whatever. You know, we're here to, like we said, we're here to have fun. You can't make people have fun, unfortunately, and sometimes some people aren't gonna have fun no matter what you do. So sometimes you just got to do it.
Flat out, I have an awesome character. I roll a 1 on a death save. That's 2 failures. I use my reroll. I get another 1. I get another 1 after that. Like
it's meant to be.
The dice gods have determined that character is dead.
Yep.
You know, and that's just from our lifelong service to our dice cult.
Yeah. When I'm getting 1s, I know I messed up and I gotta pray a little bit harder.
Dice, D&D, pizza. It's a cult.
Yeah, heavy metal, heavy metal music.
Yeah,
it's all in there.
When you show up to stuff like that as a pizza delivery driver, you gotta wonder.
It's life changing.
But yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of good bases for this whole PC NPC.
It's a very
how do you handle?
Yeah, it's a crazy topic. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot you got to take into account, and people got to be on board. Like I've had people who literally said, "If you kill my character, I'm not going to play with you." I'm like, "Well, then what are you doing?" Like,
I also don't believe that should limit you as a DM. You know what I mean? Like if somebody point blank said that to me, I'm going to be like, "Hey, I'm not trying to go out and kill your character, but if you make a stupid decision, I'm gonna let your character die."
If you're playing in a game with guns and you point a gun at like a group of gangsters and they all have their guns pointed at you, like guess what?
Shots are gonna be fired.
I can't help you. I can't help you.
That's just the thing is that like Steven kind of brought this up before, was he said, I was playing Mirek that was a diplomat. You know, he wasn't a combatant, and he found himself in combat situations, and he tried to use his abilities to get out of these combat situations. And that was the character that he was playing, and it wasn't easy, but he made it work. And that is entirely different. That's a seasoned role player saying, hey, I'm playing a role, I'm filling a niche, this is what I'm doing. He was helping me out because I needed somebody to travel with another player in my game because the party had been separated. That's completely different in my mind. Versus where if somebody says, I'm not going to play because my character could die, then I would be like, okay, well, what is it that your character is going to do? Is your character just going to stay in the tavern the whole time? Is your character going to just... Are you gonna like go to work 9 to 5 as your D&D character, or are you gonna like, you know what I mean?
Or
like,
are we fighting dragons?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is that like there's an inherent risk in the game. You're supposed to be an adventurer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You don't have to be the best fighter or the strongest or the smartest or whatever. Everybody has their different thing to bring to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not commoners and cubicles. It's Dungeons and Dragons. You're an adventurer.
Man,
it's a T-shirt right there. I'm making that.
That's get that. Write that down. That'd even be. I think we could make a pretty cool board game out of that too.
I don't know if Sporks Mackenzie would let that one fly, but
well, they all can't be as great.
Fail all his death saves then.
Whoa! Don't you put that on him?
Don't you
put
Sporks?
Sporks is our chef.
Now there is one
That's
thing we didn't bring up that is important to this subject. I don't know if you guys want to get into it because how much coincides with it, but it's PvP.
Ooh. I think we could do a whole another episode on that. I'd like to really delve into
I
that
think we should
because
save it because I think Steve and I have a good. We have a good.
Yeah.
We can have a very good conversation about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
I
guys
think-
could. And also DMing that is, there's a lot to that. So the gist with PvP, though, we should at least let people know, like, there's a lot to it, and everybody needs to be on the same page. If somebody's not, I've seen terrible situations. Cody has a very good story about a terrible situation that he witnessed as, a new player to a group. Don't just mess around with that. Like, don't just be like, oh, well, I don't like your character, so I'm gonna kill it without talking to that player first. Like,
Oh my
Yeah.
god, that was so bad.
well, let's save it for that episode.
That was so bad.
I've heard the stories, and I think everybody else will gladly want to hear.
Yeah, so we're gonna have that as a different podcast episode without a doubt. But just in closing, like we covered about like if your PC dies, if your NPC dies, you as a dungeon master, you should probably be doing whatever you can to keep your players from just like killing each other's characters just for spite or the hell of it. So when Frank brings up PvP, that's advanced. That's like, hey, we're agreeing outside of the game that our characters are opposed to one another.
Well, that right there, right, what you said. Talk about it first. Don't
Right.
don't just, or if something comes up and it escalates in the party, you, that player, and the DM, the rest of the party all have that conversation. Hey, things are hitting a tension point between our two characters. RP wise, this could possibly happen.
yeah. When dice fly or tears roll, y'all screwed up.
Yeah, you went too far. Unless it's excitement,
Yeah.
then I guess you're playing pretty well.
Yeah. When people are cheering, like, yeah, my character died, but that was freaking awesome.
That's
All right,
awesome.
man, whatever. Like, good job.
See, I always thought the tears of my player just like fueled me. But I guess.
Well,
Then
that's
you learned
only
you
for
were
you.
right.
Yeah, that's only for you, though, Cody.
Yeah.
You
We
and your
don't
dark
encourage
heart.
everybody else
Yeah.
to do that, though.
It's yeah.
But yeah.
All right, so does anybody have anything else they would like to add to the chat about death? I'm sure we should do a second part to this, doing more in-depth stuff. But
Yeah.
I would like to just add one final point to Frank's point about
I'll allow it.
when the character dies, that's the end of the character's story. I would disagree, because death can be just the beginning as well.
Well, it could be the beginning of.
Let's say that Sporks McKenzie gets cut down in a hail of vicious magical crossbow fire.
right,
Well, maybe not 10 years or 20 years, but wizard comes along, finds this sweet spork wielding skeleton in a dungeon, brings him back.
Dude, that lore.
see, there's some more that we need to save for part 2 when it comes to the undead and even the Rakshasa and demons.
Oh, get out of here with your Rakshasa. Those
Backwards
damn
kitty paw hands!
yeah, backwards kitty paw hands. No having.
My players love Rakshasa.
All right, y'all. Well, we have been Tabletop Totality, and
And you have been our bone ponies.
take care, y'all.
Peace out.